It's early morning in the West Virginia hills, and these people are going to work. For some of them, this may be a new job, a job that takes just one day. Their work isn't difficult, but it must be done accurately. They are the election officials for a voting precinct, and they're about to open the polling place for an election. For them, it's the beginning of a long day and a very important job. The election laws of West Virginia have been developed to safeguard the vote of every citizen. The responsibility of conducting an election according to those laws rests with the precinct election officials. Their task, protecting the ballot. Each precinct in West Virginia has 5 election officials called a receiving board. Each receiving board is made up of 3 commissioners, a Democrat, a Republican, and the third from either political party, and 2 clerks, 1 from each party. This receiving board is preparing to open the polling place.
Do solemnly
First,
swear that I will faithfully and
the 5
honestly
officials
discharge my
take their
duties.
oath.
Do solemnly
Violation
swear
of the
that
oath
I
could
will
result in severe
faithfully and
penalties.
honestly discharge my duties.
Next, they check the ballot boxes to make sure they're empty.
Okay, give me the locks. These are the keys for one lock. I'll keep this set.
Let's check to see if all the supplies are here. 1 large bag, 1 card for polling place designation.
1 or more of the officials in each precinct is selected by the ballot commissioners to deliver the election supplies. The supplies are checked, and then the ballots are brought out.
These are the absentee ballots. You can put them back there. We'll count them later, but we may need them in the course of the day. And these are the ballots. You'd better count them to make sure we have the proper number.
A few other things must be done before the polls can be opened. Post instructions and sample ballots inside the polling place, and outside at least 60 feet away. Post the sign and flags in plain view outside showing this is a polling place. 5 officials must be on hand for voting to take place. If 5 are not there by 6:30, vacancies must be filled. The voters present or the officials select a qualified voter from that magisterial district who is a member of the same party as the missing official. This poll is now ready for voters. Before voting begins, let's review the steps in opening a poll. All officials take the oath of office. The commissioners check the ballot boxes to make sure they're empty. Lock the boxes with 2 locks. A commissioner from each party keeps 1 key. Check supplies. Put aside the absentee ballots for counting later. The commissioners give the wrapped and sealed ballots to the clerks. Post instructions both inside and outside the voting room. Post the polling place sign and the flags. And fill any vacancies.
This polling place is now open.
At 6:30, when a commissioner announces to those outside that the polling place is open, voting begins.
Good morning. What is your name and address, sir?
Stanley R. Sales, 175 Adams Street.
Would you sign your name and address here, please?
Stanley R. Sales.
Correct.
While one clerk has the voter fill out the poll slip, the other finds the registration records. The records will be filed in the registration book either geographically by street address or alphabetically, by the voter's last name. The clerk checks the back of the record to see if any previous challenge is still valid. She checks the physical description on the card to see if it matches the person before her. She then compares the signature on the poll slip with that on the registration record. In those counties where registration numbers are used, the clerk records the voter's number on the poll slip. Both clerks sign the back of the ballot and give it to the voter. In some elections, more than one ballot is required and all would be given to the voter.
You may use the polling booth over here, sir.
The clerk marks the registration record to show that the citizen voted in this election. After placing the poll slip in the poll book, the clerks move on to the next voter. After a voter has marked his ballot, he hands it to a commissioner. The commissioner makes sure that the correct number of properly signed ballots is presented. Then the commissioner hands the ballot to the second commissioner, who repeats the checks and then puts the ballot in the box. To prevent a voter from putting his ballot in the box himself, many commissioners keep the ballot box behind a table. Let's review the normal voting procedure. First, the clerk gives the voter the poll slip to fill out. Then she examines the registration record. She checks to see that any previous challenge has been removed. She then makes sure that the physical description matches the person before her and compares the signature on the record with that on the poll slip. She records the registration number on the poll slip. Both clerks sign the ballot. The clerk indicates on the record that the person has voted in this election. Each commissioner makes sure that the right number of official ballots is received and that both clerks have signed. The commissioners then put the ballot in the ballot box. If the precinct uses voting machines instead of paper ballots, there are a few differences in opening the poll and in voting. West Virginia uses several types of voting machines, but the basic difference between them is that some list the offices and the candidates' names from top to bottom, while others list them from left to right. The county clerk can explain in detail how the various machines work. Before the commissioners open the poll, they must check to see that the public counter and the candidate counters are set at 0, and that the order of the candidates' names listed on the machine is the same as that shown on the sample ballot. Now, let's go around the corner. The official should record the number shown on the protective or accumulative counter. If the machine is properly furnished, the commissioners unlock it for voting. If there's any problem, contact the county clerk for assistance. Except for checking the machines, the procedures for opening a polling place using machines are the same as for one using paper ballots. Checking the voter's registration is the same. But in machine voting, there are no paper ballots for the clerks to sign, although paper ballots are used in challenge votes. We'll describe those later. The poll slips, however, are different. In machine voting, the slip has a stub, which the voter gives to the commissioner who's setting the machine so he can vote. In a primary election, the clerks must determine which ballots to give to the voter. There are separate ballots for each political party, and there may be nonpartisan ballots, such as for the Board of Education. A Democrat is given a Democratic ballot and one for the Board of Education. A Republican is given a Republican ballot and one for the Board of Education. An independent voter is given only the nonpartisan Board of Education ballot. A person who will be 18 by the time of the general election may vote in the primary, although she is only 17. But she may vote only a party ballot. If any election official feels there's a reason a voter should not be allowed to vote, the official should have the voter cast a challenged ballot. There are several reasons for challenging a voter. If no registration record can be found, if the signature on the poll slip differs from that on the registration record, if the voter has moved from his precinct more than 30 days before the election and not changed his registration address, or if a person has changed his name more than 30 days before the election. A voter may move from his precinct within 30 days of an election and still vote, or may move within a precinct and still vote. In these cases, the voter would not be challenged.
I'm sorry, we don't have a registration record for you. You could either call the county clerk's office and check on it, or you can vote a challenged ballot.
How do I do that?
We give you an unsigned ballot, which you take into the booth and mark, and when you've finished, you give it to one of the commissioners, and she will put it in the challenge envelope. Then it won't be counted tonight, but when the canvassing board meets, they will decide if it should be counted.
Any time there's a doubt about the legality of a voter's registration, the election official should challenge the vote. A record of the challenge and of the challenger's name is made on the voter's registration record. Malicious or frivolous challenges should not be made. They could lead to a fine and jail sentence for the official. The absentee ballots which are brought to the poll along with the election supplies are not counted until the polls close, but they may be needed during the day.
I voted absentee, but I got back into town today. Could you destroy my absentee ballot?
Okay, what's your name?
Mary Stone.
Would you please fill out the poll slip?
The law requires that a person voting an absentee ballot who can come to the polls on election day must come, have his absentee ballot destroyed, and cast another ballot. If he doesn't do this, his absentee ballot can be challenged. And the law sets limitations on giving assistance to voters.
Upper County Clerk Gregory L. Teets, been on the circuit court.
I'm sorry, I'll have to ask you to stop helping your wife. Once a voter is within 60 feet of the polling place, no assistance can be given.
Except when they're assisting voters, even the election officials must stay at least 5 feet from an occupied voting booth. Sample ballots may be used as guides while voting, and election officials may provide assistance to voters under 2 circumstances. To voters whose registration records indicate they cannot write, or to voters who've been certified by a doctor as being blind. The blind voter can be aided by the person of her choice. The illiterate voter may receive help only from the poll clerks, and both clerks must be present. They may read the candidate's names to the voter, show him where the names are located, and even mark his ballot if he desires. The 5 officials of the receiving board have an obligation to stay at their jobs, since all are needed to carry out the election. If they leave their posts to get food or use the restroom, they should return promptly. But if one of the poll clerks leaves, that clerk may sign some ballots in advance so that voters will not be kept waiting, since the signatures of both clerks are required. The remaining clerk should not sign the ballot until it is given to a voter. If an official is not working in his own precinct, he can vote in one of 2 ways without leaving his working place: by voting an absentee ballot before the election day, or by voting a challenged ballot at the place he works. The challenged ballot will be counted later by the canvassing board.
I'm sorry, I got mixed up and marked this wrong. Could I have another ballot, please?
If a voter mismarks a ballot, she may be given a new one. The clerk should destroy the old one and keep a record of the number of ballots so destroyed. A form is provided with the poll book for this purpose. In many West Virginia precincts, there's another board that works at the polling place, the counting board. It's also composed of 3 commissioners and 2 clerks, and its job is to count the votes. The counting board arrives no later than 9:30 a.m., and the officials take their oaths. Vacancies must be filled before counting can begin. The counting board is given one of the ballot boxes and begins counting.
Counting room. These are the keys. The other commissioner will give you the other set of keys. Would you 3 like to follow, and you can start counting?
The commissioners read and string the votes. The clerks record them on the tally sheets. Votes may be tabulated periodically during the day before the polls close, but a sufficient number of ballots must be collected in each ballot box before counting to preserve the secrecy of all ballots.
Samuel McHenry, Attorney General, Willard Clegg.
Before counting can be completed, the poll must be closed.
It's 7:30. The poll is closed.
Can't I vote?
No, I'm sorry, but the law states that the polls must close at 7:30 and no one can vote after that.
A clerk records the time the poll closes. Then the commissioners count the number of ballots destroyed during the day and the number of ballots not used. This is recorded. Next, the officials check the absentee ballot number 2 envelopes to see if any absentee ballots should be challenged. If challenges are made, the appropriate information is entered on the number 2 envelope, and it's placed in the envelope for challenged ballots. A poll slip is filled out for each absentee ballot. Then the number 1 envelopes are removed from the number 2 envelopes and shuffled to conceal the identity of the voters. Then the ballots are removed. Both clerks sign the back of the ballots, and they record an A for absent voting on each voter's registration record. The absentee ballots are placed in the ballot box before counting. Next, the officials determine from the poll book the number of votes cast, and in some counties sign the next blank poll slip. The officials record this information on the appropriate forms and sign them. In a primary election, this is done for each party. Counting in a single-board paper ballot precinct takes place only after the poll closes, but in a 2-board precinct, counting begins in the morning and continues while voting goes on. Thus, 2 ballot boxes are needed. When the ballots in one box have been counted, they're sealed in the envelope provided, and the 2 boxes are exchanged. This process continues throughout the day until the polls are closed, and the receiving board joins the counting board to complete the tabulations.
How's it going?
Oh,
For general elections, 2 tally sheets are used. For primary elections, there are 2 for each party. These tally sheets will be sent to the clerk of the county court in special envelopes. Sometimes a voter fails to mark his ballot correctly, and officials are not sure whether to count the votes. The law states that if the intention of the voter is understood, the vote must be counted. The copy of the election code provided at all precincts describes typical irregularly marked ballots. Officials should familiarize themselves with these examples. After the votes have been recorded on the tally sheets, the totals are recorded on the certificates of results. For general elections, there are at least 4 certificates. For primary elections, there are at least 4 for each party. One certificate is sent to the clerk of the circuit court, at least 1 to the clerk of the county court, and 1 to the Secretary of State. The last certificate is posted at the polling place. After the votes have been tabulated, the ballots which were sealed in temporary envelopes during the day are removed, and all marked ballots are put into the specially marked envelope to be returned to the county clerk. In primary elections, all Democratic ballots are placed in one envelope, all Republican ballots in another, and all nonpartisan ballots in a third. After counting is completed, all supplies and ballots should be returned promptly to the county clerk's office, usually by the officials who brought them to the polls. Some county clerks ask that the certificates of results directed to the Secretary of State and the Circuit Court clerk be returned to him along with the election supplies. The county clerk then passes them on to the appropriate officials. The total vote of all ballots cast in nonpartisan contests by Democrats, Republicans, and others must be entered on the certificates of results of all parties. Thus, the total votes cast at a precinct for a Board of Education election is listed on both Democratic and Republican certificates of results. Write-in votes are allowable only in general and nonpartisan elections. Write-in votes in a party primary are not counted. When precincts using machines are closed, the officials lock the machine against further voting. Then they compare the number of voters shown on the public counter with the number shown on the protective or accumulative counter around the corner. The officials then sign a certificate that the machine has been locked and sealed and register the numbers on the two counters along with the identification number of the machine. One machine is left open to record the absentee ballots. After the absentee ballots are recorded, it too is locked and sealed. Any candidate or his representative may be present to inspect the counters on the machine and observe counting. The commissioners open the machine so results of the voting can be seen. Then they read the results off the counters for the candidates for each office. The names and the results for each office must be read before going on to the next office. The clerks record the vote on at least 3 return sheets. All the officials sign these sheets. The certificates of results are directed to the clerks of the county and circuit courts and to the Secretary of State. Problems may arise which we haven't covered here. If emergency supplies are needed, contact the county clerk's office. If there's any question about the law and what to do, check the election code. If the question can't be answered at the polling place, contact the prosecuting attorney's office, which will be staffed all day, or call the Secretary of State's office. If you need law enforcement help, call the police. And remember, as election officials, yours is a very important obligation. Severe penalties can be imposed for revealing the nature of a person's vote, or falsifying the election results, or otherwise violating the election laws. The day is over, the task completed. You're tired, but you've a feeling of satisfaction. You've played a vital role in the democratic process of choosing your government. You've done your part in protecting the ballot.